It's a done deal. A new global climate agreement has been reached and declared both a success and a failure.
Hearing no objections, it is so decided.
Despite some last-minute watering down, the final treaty is praised by delegates as an historic result. And Conference President Alok Sharma seemed almost moved to tears.
It's also vital that we protect this package.
But outside Glasgow, Labour and others have called it a missed opportunity. Also tonight, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives is criticised for an alleged breach of MPs' standards. As the Dutch go back into lockdown, there's a new push for COVID safety to prevent another shutdown here. And the Queen misses the Festival of Remembrance, but will she be well enough for the cenotaph tomorrow?
This is ITV News with Lucy Watson.
Good evening. When the final treaty was tabled, it's fair to say many of the delegates at the COP26 climate conference were disappointed. India managed to change the language at the last minute, turning the phasing out of coal into merely phasing it down. But despite the misgivings of some, all 197 countries present voted for the deal, accepting that it was the best that could be achieved. And it keeps the dream of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees still alive, but only if much more work is done in the year ahead. Our Deputy Political Editor, Anushka Astana, reports now from Glasgow.
On what he hoped would be the final day of COP26, President Alok Sharma tried to get things going.
Could I please request you all to take your seats?
Were they not listening?
Colleagues, we were due to start an hour ago.
Or just not ready?
There are a number of parties that are still wanting to have a discussion and resolve issues. And I have decided that I think it would be useful to allow a little bit more time.
Minister, how's it all going?
45 minutes later, could this wave from China's climate chief be a good sign? Who then poured over the deal with the US's John Kerry, talking, checking, and ending with a fist bump. But soon, a Chinese and Indian intervention and the mood turned tense, with frantic talks, a possible agreement, and then this.
India wishes to take the floor. India, you have the floor.
I propose accelerating effort to phase down unabated coal power.
Phase down, not phase out coal. A watering down of language at the 11th hour that stunned the hall.
We believe we have been sidelined in a non-transparent and non-inclusive process.
We know that the longer you take to get rid of coal, the more burden you put on a natural environment.
This will not bring us closer to 1.5, but make it more difficult to reach it.
I'm deeply sorry.
It also left the president in tears.
I also understand the deep disappointment. But I think, as you have noted, it's also vital that we protect this package.
The Glasgow Climate Pact was eventually done. Mr. Sharma, when you cried on stage, was it because you knew that this deal was not enough to protect the most vulnerable countries?
I'm sorry that we couldn't hold the original language on coal, but nevertheless we do have language on coal, and I think that is a start.
A start, but a long way to go. Anushka Astana, ITV News, Glasgow.
Well, our political editor, Robert Peston, is also in Glasgow tonight. Robert, just how important is this agreement?
really important. I mean, right now, global temperatures are set to rise by more than 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. And if that level of global warming is hit, entire nation states, islands will disappear, and there will be devastation across poor countries, droughts, fires and the rest. Now, what this conference has achieved is a plan to push global warming down to 1.5 degrees. But it is not guaranteed. Alok Sharma, the president of COP26, said that the pulse of 1.5, in his words, was weak. It requires, over the next year, under the agreement that has been reached, countries to come back with new plans to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions before 2030. There's a ton of work to do. There's a second reason why this agreement is so important. You heard Anushka talking about the intervention of India and China. Many climate activists are devastated that they have softened the language of getting rid of coal. But what we did see was India and China bossing the rest of the world. It's a new world order.
Robert, thank you. The leader of the Scottish Conservatives has referred himself to Parliament Standards Commissioner after admitting he failed to declare all of his extra income. Tonight, the SNP are calling it another example of Tory sleaze. Well, our political correspondent Romilly Weeks joins me now. Romilly, what has been the reaction to this?
Well, Douglas Ross is the latest politician to find his work outside politics under scrutiny. And while his earnings aren't on the scale of Geoffrey Cook's, for example, he has admitted that he failed to properly declare them and reported himself to the Parliamentary Standards Watchdog, as you say. And it shows the continuing and uncomfortable light that is being shed on MPs' outside interests, a light that is not portraying Boris Johnson in a flattering way either, because there's renewed scrutiny of his affair with the businesswoman Jennifer Arcuri. Her diary extracts are published in The Observer tomorrow, and she suggests that Boris Johnson promised to boost her business while he was pursuing a relationship with her. Do voters care about this wave of sleaze spreading over politics? Well, a Comrades Savanta poll for the Daily Mail suggests that Labour now has a 6-point lead, while an opinion poll for The Observer tomorrow gives Labour a 1-point lead. And there are 2 by-elections in December, which will give voters an early chance to express their views.
Romilly, thank you. In the last few hours, the Netherlands has been put into a new 3-week lockdown, the first country in Western Europe to do so after a new wave of infections there. And while cases in the UK have levelled off recently, scientists are concerned that action may be needed to keep the surge from crossing the channel. Dan Rivers has the story.
This was the angry reaction in The Hague last night as a new lockdown was announced amid rising cases of COVID-19 across the Netherlands. The Dutch Prime Minister telling his country the measures were inevitable and would be needed for 3 weeks. In Austria, a lockdown is being enforced just on the unvaccinated. Police checking all customers in bars and restaurants have been jabbed. And Germany is deploying 12,000 soldiers to help with vaccinations and testing. Scientists here are divided about whether we'll soon face a spike in cases after recent falls. Some are very worried.
We're looking at Europe and seeing countries respond, as they should to rising cases, whereas in England, the narrative seems to be, yes, we're happy with 40,000 cases a day and we need to be acting yesterday, not tomorrow.
We're seeing some lovely handling from both sides.
Today, this advert was played at the autumn international rugby matches, encouraging people to be mindful of the virus and get their booster jabs.
Windows got to be kept open in these enclosed spaces to keep the air flowing.
A message reinforced by the Prime Minister yesterday, worried about rising case numbers in Europe.
I'm seeing the storm clouds gathering over parts of the European continent. And I've got to be absolutely frank with people, and we've been here before.
Despite the lockdown, Dutch people were out today for the traditional welcoming of St. Nicholas, but many are all too aware that Christmas is now hanging in the balance. The government here pinning hopes on this 3-week lockdown, bringing down cases in time for the holidays. Dan Rivers, ITV News.
Richard Radcliffe has ended a 21-day hunger strike outside the Foreign Office. He was calling for action to bring his wife Nazanin home. She has been detained in Iran for 5 years. He says she begged him to stay healthy for their daughter. And Britney Spears has described it as the best day ever when a judge formally handed her control of her finances again. The singer's father had been legally in charge of her money for nearly 14 years. To rugby, and 2 of 3 top-ranked nations have suffered an upset in the autumn internationals today. New Zealand were beaten by Ireland in Dublin, and Australia was seen off by England at Twickenham. Only South Africa withstood a brave fight by Scotland at Murrayfield. Chris Scudder reports.
A new look for England against the old enemy, and this was why. Young fly-half Marcus Smith combining with fullback Freddie Stewart. England then had the last word with a second try from replacement hooker Jamie Blamire. That's 8 wins in a row against the Aussies. In Dublin, rarely had the famous haka looked less intimidating. Ireland met it head-on and Lansdowne Road was rocking when James Lowe scored an early try. 2 years ago, Ireland had lost to the All Blacks at the World Cup in Japan, and 2 further tries in the second half had the crowd in raptures. Amazing! Ireland then tackled like lions when the heat was on. The cover, James Lowe there. And a monster penalty from halfway from Joey Carberry brought the house down. A famous victory for Ireland, 29 points to 20. If Scotland are on the rise, this was the biggest test of their progress against the world champions, and at half-time they led the Springboks with the first of 2 tries from captain Stuart Hogg. It took some strong words from South Africa's own captain Kolisi to turn it round, but that's just what they did. The world champions having just too much in the second half, winning 30 points to 15. Chris Scudder, ITV News.
Football now, and Wales are on course for a home playoff place in qualifying for next year's World Cup. They beat Belarus 5-1 tonight in Cardiff to stay second in their group. Their final qualifying match will be against Belgium on Tuesday. And finally, 2 heirs to the throne attended the Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Festival Hall in London tonight. The event is held every year to honour all who have lost their lives in conflict. Prince Charles and Camilla shared the royal box with Prince William and Kate. The Queen was absent on the advice of her doctors, but aides say she is determined to be at the cenotaph tomorrow. And that's it from all of us on The Weekend Team. The weather forecast is next. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Bye-bye.